So welcome. Welcome, welcome on this beautiful Labor Day weekend. So today we are finishing up our series on the faces of God, the many faces of God. I have so enjoyed it, and I hope you have too. My goal in this series was just to give us some of the tools to broaden our experience of how we meet and interact with and just experience the divine. And so what we've talked about is something really we're going to want to keep in mind as we continue throughout the rest of our year in all the series that are coming up. So in his book, The Power of Myth, Joseph Campbell addressed the question of his faith in spirit. And he gave a very famous quote. He said, "I don't have to have faith, I have experience." I don't have to have faith, I have experience. So what did he mean? Here's what I think he meant. I think he was telling us that for him, faith in God was just a cold substitute for the actual experience of God, for the meeting of God, the interaction with God. He was also telling us that the experience of God is available to us here and now, all of us. He was saying, I have had this experience and so can you. So you don't need to settle for what folks are telling you, you just need to sit and believe. You may remember a couple weeks ago we were talking about some of the experiences we may have had as kids. And I don't mean to transfer my experiences onto you. I'm just going on what I've heard and what many of us have experienced. In our youth, if we grew up in one of the Abrahamic traditions, if we grew up in a Christian tradition, as I did, we would sit in the pews of whatever denomination and we were told that we had to believe. Does anyone remember that? God required us to believe. Moreover, we needed to believe that certain events had taken place which to our 20th century minds, our little scientific brains, we knew were highly improbable. We were told to believe that God parted the Red Sea, that the sun stood still, that the world was created in 6 days, despite all those dinosaurs that we were constantly trying to dig up. I don't know about you, but I had like a 6-foot hole in my backyard. But regardless, we were told that the world was created in 6 days, or that Jesus changed water into wine, or that God physically raised Jesus from the dead. I don't know about you, but my little mind just boggled. It did not make any sense to me. Better yet, as a matter of fact, your bona fides, your credentials as a Christian, and indeed your salvation, your going to heaven, depended on whether you believed these events had occurred. If you didn't believe they had occurred, as we say, God help you. It's as if we had to believe in these events which were, as Marcus Borg terms them, beyond the limits of the spectacular. They were things that we just knew were so highly improbable, but to be proper, in my respect, a Christian, we had to believe they were true, or we had to say they believed that we were true. Borg writes that God insisted in our unwavering belief in historical events, or what we were taught were historical events, which were very unlikely to have happened. Many of us, as we grew up, we simply said, I think not. I decline. We're not going to go there. In our spiritual evolution, as we move beyond the mythical or the magical way of thinking that sometimes children have, as we moved into more critical thinking, we simply put that aside. We could not respect a God whose existence depended on us laying aside so much of what we knew to be true. That was my experience. However, our search did not end. Some people just said, well, if I have to believe that, there's just no God. But I suspect that for many of us sitting in this room, and indeed for me, my search did not end there. Because I knew that there was more to this wonderful creation and more to us than a world limited to what we can weigh or cut or measure or see. We knew that that was too small. We were in a bind. The God they were telling us about was too small, and the science we were told was the substitute was also too small. So where do we go with this? Our unwillingness to believe in this series of factual improbabilities didn't mean that our search for the ground of all being was over, because we knew it was out there. I knew it was out there. We simply demanded that there was more to this than just belief. We knew that the power that created us, that created what I learned is over 100 billion galaxies. Yes, I did Google. The miracle of life, the drive to know and to build and to explore and to climb and to swim and to heal. That required a power that was beyond what we could simply see. It also was a power that had to be accessible, that was accessible to us right now and right here, if we were open to it and we could access it. So we continued to seek this experience of the divine. We continued to look for, as Thomas Merton called it, a way to God. So that's the question we've been exploring in this series. Together we've taken a look at the many ways we explore spirit. We've looked at the divine face of the feminine, which was wonderful. We've looked at how we find God in contemplation, in music, in wonder, in community. We've looked at the many ways that we experience the divine. We've looked at all these in the context of the notion that I suggested of the three faces of God, the notion that was articulated by theoretical psychologist and philosopher Ken Wilber. If any of you ever have a chance to read any Ken Wilber, I urge you to do so. He has some columns on BeliefNet. He's got some books which are just wonderful. So this is an idea that I'd like to explore a little more today. I've been promising I'm going to do it. I've been promising I'm also going to focus on the second face of God, which is sometimes problematic for us. And let me talk a little more about that. So to recap, the three faces of God, as Wilber articulates them, are basically God as me, the God within, the divine spark within, the God we find in relationship, and we just went through that. We just went through the sharing of joys and concerns. Isn't that what we did? We were experiencing the second face of God. Heal this person. Thank you for this. Look at what just happened. Send her off with joy and courage. That is a second face experience. And it's a rich, invigorating experience. That is the second face of God, the God we find in relationship. The third face of God is the wow God, the God of all there is, the God that we see in nature, the God that created everything of which we are a part, the universal power. So, what I'd like to suggest, and what I want to talk about today, is that our spiritual walk, our spirituality as a whole is deepened and nourished and just made stronger when we can embrace and experience all three aspects as a way to perceive and experience God. And when I say God, I'm saying God, Spirit, whatever word you want to substitute. I know some people get kind of itchy with the word God, so it's just use any word. Whatever your universal power is, however you articulate that for yourself. I read somebody said that he was told that God is the great norm. God is the great norm that creates all of us. So he had a guy in his class who went around calling God Norm. Okay? We can do that. The great norm. Okay. So let's start with the third face. Everyone loves the third face of God. This is the aspect of God that we experience with our senses, right? We see the beauty of the Grand Canyon. We see a wonderful sunrise or a sunset. I don't know about you, but we're seeing some beautiful sunsets around here nowadays. There was one a couple weeks ago that I just got my wife up, which is pretty drastic since she just had knee surgery, and I said, stand up, you got to come see this. And we stood in front of our garage and just saw something that reminded us that God is out there. It was just beautiful, and I know you've all seen those. The face of a baby, a smile from a friend or a beloved, that picture of the earth that was taken in 1968 during the Apollo 8 mission that we all call Earthrise. How can you look at that and not know that there is something out there which is just magnificent? That is the third face of God. Ken Wilber calls this face the great perfection of existence itself unfolding. Isn't that beautiful? The great perfection of existence itself unfolding. Always unfolding. Always creating. Right in front of us and involving us. This is the face that gave astronaut Edgar Mitchell the insight that Tina Rattoni just read about, in which he realized that his very physical being was interconnected with all of life. His molecules were not new to him. They were stardust. He was a creation of the universe and connected with all of us. And this is a man of science. This is not somebody who, spends his time, in New Age bookstores. This is a guy who is on an Apollo mission, and yet he could have that transformative, that transcendent experience. This is the knowing of God whom we call the great web of life, the great web of everything. So this is a wonderful aspect of God. And all these three faces are ways to perceive and understand and experience the same energy. These are not different energies. But the third face is a wonderful, transformative way to view the divine. But it's not complete. In no way is it complete. Now, why is that? Because, in a sense, we're just observers. We're marveling at creation, but we're not doing a whole lot of the inner work that grows us. This is like the, oh, wow. We're just looking. And we're saying this is wonderful, but it's only a part of what we can truly experience. Not much is asked of us. We really are not all that much involved as separate, as individual human beings. So, let's take a look at the second face of God, or what some people call the much maligned second face of God. Okay, and stick with me on this. I tell you, I had to think about this so much this week. I was thinking about it so much, my head hurt, because these are tough concepts. This is what I like to call heavy sledding. So if I say anything to you that sparks any bit of interest, that makes you think for a second, wow, maybe there's something there, I am not going to wrap it up in a bow, because that's not how this is. We live in a world of mystery. Spirituality and our relationship with God are things of mystery. But if you hear anything today that sparks your interest, let's pursue it. Because what we're doing is starting down a road which is so rich. So, the second face of God. This is the familial face. This is where we find God in relationship. This is the God that most of us, or who grew up in one of the Abrahamic traditions, are most familiar with. This is the guy with the white beard on a cloud. The God in that mural in the Sistine Chapel that Asha put on the website for our talk here today. You know, the one with God reaching out and Adam reaching out? It's a great picture. She called me up and she said, I don't know if I can put this on because Adam is naked. This is a deep theological question. What the heck? Put it on. So anyway, that's that beautiful mural on the Sistine Chapel. The anthropomorphic God that looks like us, and in many biblical stories, unfortunately, behaved like us. Petty, small, cruel, jealous. This is the God of the Hebrew Bible that ordered the slaughter of entire populations, that sent a flood to wipe out nearly everybody on earth, subjected poor Job to the loss of his family and his possessions based on a bet with Lucifer. I mean, think about it. This is the God who, we are told, loved us so much that he sent his only son to die for us to expiate sins that he laid on us as a sacrifice to him. Now, I know none of you are standing too close to me, so if I'm struck down, y'all will be fine. I had some issues with that. And this is not the time for me to talk about my issues, but part of it was the God that loved us so much that he sent his only son, and I thought, what about all those mothers who send their sons and daughters to war? What about people who lose their kids, their beloved only children? I said, surely to God, he's not the only one who did that. There has to be more than that. And so my mind had difficulty wrapping around that. This is the face, that second face, that disillusioned so many of us that we just did not understand. It didn't make us give up on God. It just made us give up on that particular theology. And actually, in the reading that I do, what I've learned is that what they call the sacrificial theory of Jesus' death, the sacrificial theory of why he died on the cross, really is actually kind of new. And that's going to be the subject of another talk. It's really within the last couple hundred years that has really come, well, a little longer than that. But that is not part of original Christianity. But that's an interesting side thought, which I won't continue. Okay. So, the face of God that we're just talking about, that judgmental, that vengeful God, is not the whole story of the familial, the relational sense of God. That is the, if you will, the unhealthy side. There's also a much healthier side to the relational, the familiar God. We have experiences of a relational God who is loving, who is supportive. Unity co-founder Myrtle Fillmore wrote, "Sometimes I have written a letter to God when I have wanted to be sure that something would have divine consideration and attention." Isn't that sweet? She wrote a letter to God when she wanted to make sure something was high up on his list. That's kind of what we do here when we pray, we ask, and we thank. That's the face that Jesus called Abba. which is translated loosely as daddy. That's the intimate, the loving face. That's also a relational face. Now, this is not a different God than the supreme energy that created everything or the divine spark that is inside us. It's just a different way of approaching it. Imagine all the power of the universe, all the flash, all the fire, all the energy of the universe that just banged and created everything. Imagine it crystallized into one figure. Just crystallized into one white-hot figure and sitting right there. That's the relational phase. We are interacting with the same power. We just look at it differently. And looking at it differently opens up doors for us that we could not have otherwise. When we are young, this face starts out as a magical or a mythic god, the guy on the cloud I talked about, the guy who made Georgia win last night. Let's just take a moment, breathe in that. Or Clemson, whatever, the guy who punishes us, who gets us that part of his face. That's the Santa Claus view. We rejected that view. A lot of us just said, no, this is not enough. Our challenge is to grow into a more mature version of that relational God. When we abandon or when we walk away from the mythic or the magical view, what we risk doing is throwing out that whole baby with the bathwater. We risk saying, oh, the heck with it, there's no relational God. It's all out here or it's all in here. We are missing so much. And our healthy spirituality happens when we can bring that back in a more mature, spiritually evolved way. Seeing spirit in relationship, in healthy relationship, gives us an opportunity to grow that no other aspect does. In looking at the divine from where we are, from these very human suits, we reach toward the divine with our human selves that no other face gives us. When we feel pain, we turn for help. When we feel fearful or lonely, which we all do, we surrender to the knowing that we are in the presence of a power beyond ourselves. It is okay to do that. It is richer to do that. I don't know about you, but sometimes when I came to New Thought, I was confused by how to pray. I thought, if I was God, I can't pray to myself. That's kind of a losing proposition because I'm the one in trouble. Where do we go with this? So I wondered, and many of us may have wondered, what to do. How do we pray? It's this relational phase where we can see that that power can be in relation to us, because that's the way we as humans grow. We grow in relationship, whether it's with God or with each other. We are people of community, and we become richer when we can view our relationship with the divine that way. We turn our very human, limited faces toward this energy that we know is all good, all loving, all sustaining, which is conspiring for our greater good. And we look at it and we just go, thank you. And we surrender to it in a way we cannot do to the other two faces. We know we are not carrying all this ourselves, that we can release these burdens because Spirit is there and is carrying us along in the great river that is all life. Author Karen Kelly teaches that the second phase is like Eric Butterworth's analogy to the ocean and drops of ocean water. We are each a drop of ocean water. Our drop contains all the attributes and all the elements of the entire ocean, but it is not the entire ocean. In the second phase, we can surrender to the vastness, to the entirety of the entire ocean. Sustaining us, we are a part of it, but we can surrender to the fact that we are not all of it. We don't have to be all of it. The second phase gives us a chance to express in our own lives the love and the compassion we get back from Spirit when we deal with Spirit relationally. We can feel broken, we become healed. We can feel unworthy, we get forgiveness, we get healing. So what happens? When we experience that with God, what do? It gives us the capacity to move beyond our own ego and share it with others. We can become God in expression because we have seen those attributes coming back at us. This is where we learn that God is found in relationship with others in what Martin Buber called the I-thou. He taught us that God is found in the hyphen. God is found in the space between you and me. The dialogue between us is where God is created. And we learn that in the relational phase. And we can recreate it in our interactions with others. The relationship we find with Spirit grows to encompass the relationship with all others we meet. The circle widens. We come to understand that a power that is constantly calling out to us, the love that is the essence of ourselves, and the essence of it is operating in our lives. The relational God is calling to us to be everything that the divine in us is. And that's where we find it. It's not from looking at a sunset or even from sitting and thinking and being in the silence. It's from wrestling with the questions, the fear, the loneliness, stretching out, reaching out to each other. That's where we as humans step into our divinity. And that's the richness of accepting and living with and embracing the relational face of God, the second face of Spirit. It doesn't mean we are less. It means that we are becoming. So we move to the first face. This is where I am God. This is what I did when I was 10, and I wrote up on the blackboard, I am God. I knew it very early on. This is where we sit and we express as the divine on earth. This is where we experience God in our very essence. This is the face Ken Wilber calls the singular to which the plural is unknown. The singular to which the plural is unknown. It's where God is all. God is inside and is everything. It's the great I am. Christ consciousness, the God within, Buddha nature, what we called last week the Atman. This is the God within. It's reached. How do we reach it? Through a contemplative practice, through meditation, through prayer, through whatever device shuts down our ego minds and lets us connect with our soul inside. This is where we have peak transformations. We have satori. We have insights. We connect with the God within. We can have amazing experiences with the first face of God. However, if we limit ourselves to that face, what do we risk? Well, one thing we risk is we risk confusing our own ego with the reality of God. Because it is so, for lack of a better term, self-centered. We risk becoming arrogant because, after all, we are God. The divine is within. All is in perfect order. All I need to do is look inside. That's a part of it, but is not all of it. Wilber actually calls this boomeritis. It's a word I love. He says it's boomeritis. We bow to nothing. We are humble at nothing. Sometimes the word humility gets a bad rap because it kind of suggests that we are less. But to me, the word humility suggests that we know that there is more, and we move toward it. But we know we are not there yet. That is our spiritual journey. If we were there, we would not be traveling. Right? That's why we're here. That's why we came back. We said, yeah, I'm going to come back, and I'm going to incarnate, and I'm going to grow more into my divinity. But we don't arrive that way. That's where the second phase helps us. And this is also where it gets very cool. A full and rich experience of the second phase leads us into a much deeper experience of the first phase. This is what I struggled with this week, because I didn't want to get up here and just say, oh, these three phases are really cool, even though they are. I wanted to give you some thoughts as to why all three of them working together lead us into a richer experience. Do you see the difference? The second phase, a rich relational aspect, experience of God, gives us a much deeper experience when we go inside, when we see the God within, because we know that that is still growing. We learn grace, we learn gratitude, we learn some humility. We see that we are of God, but we are not the entirety of God. It helps us see beyond our ego. It removes our arrogance. It enriches that whole contemplative, meditative experience. We avoid the trap of ego. So, I promised you at the beginning that some of this might be heavy sledding. For me, it is. And it might be for you as well. But it's a wonderful road to begin our trip down? These are questions, they do not have any neat answers. One of the things that is both wonderful and sometimes infuriating is we have to be comfortable with some ambiguity. We have to be comfortable with living in the mystery. I think it was St. Augustine who said, if you think you know God, you have failed. It's like, oh, darn, okay, well, I'm not going to step into that trap. We grow in the mystery, and this is one of those mysteries in which we grow. So let me close with a useful way to think about the three faces. This is from Reverend Paul Smith, a Unity minister in Kansas City. The third face is the God in which we live and move and have our being. The second face is you are always with us. And the first face is the God within. We are the light of the world. Our lives become so much the richer when we can walk and experience all three. So let's take these thoughts into meditation.